Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. So all the important people in the world, including Professor John Kirton, are out in Kananaskis, Alberta today, and I guess for a few days at the G7, which is now a little bit more than the G7 meeting of leaders of the I guess the free world. John Kirton, he's a professor emeritus at University of Toronto, and he is director of the G7 Research Group, the G20 Research Group, and the Global Health Diplomacy Program. And we thought we'd connect up with him to find out what's going on. What are the leaders saying? What's the results? Is this still relevant? And what about Donald Trump? Professor Kirton, welcome to the show.
Well, I think we're on track for what we'll see at the end, which is a significant performance by the G7 leaders here at their Kananaskis summit. They got off to a very good, strong start on day one when Donald Trump got up at the beginning in a very good mood, got to work right away, and made real progress in his bilateral meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on the number one issue, Trump's tariff war against Canada. And then in his other bilateral meetings with European leaders and with the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer also made progress on the tariff war. Indeed, signed a joint document with Sir Keir Starmer, basically taking down some of the recent Trump tariffs against the UK. And in the case of Canada, he and Carney promised that they would basically try and get a deal within the next 30 days. So a near-in deadline, so this will not drag on. We also saw in many of the bilaterals, most of them between other leaders without Trump, a stronger cooperation, basically showing that if Donald Trump did not want to cooperate as much as he should, then the rest of the G7 leaders were combining amongst themselves without the United States to do the job instead in the many ways they could. Not all, but there are many where stronger cooperation among them can really make a difference. Then at the end of the day, we did see Donald Trump deciding that he really needed to fly back to Washington to his command center as Commander-in-Chief of the United States to deal with the latest escalation of Israel's war against Iran and the Iranian retaliation. That was a bit of a disappointment because he wouldn't be there for the G7 dinner and any cultural program later on in the evening, let alone the meeting with all of the guest leaders on day two. But still, at several G7 summits in the past, some leaders have left early, some have come late. So this was, close to a routine part of the G7 process. And everybody, I think, understood that they really wanted Trump in the saddle to try and prevent any out-of-control escalation of the Israeli-Iranian war. We did have to wait until the end of day two when all of the summit documents would be released all at once. Several on the specific priorities Carney had sent: wildfires, artificial intelligence, foreign interference, AI, as well as the short, clear, crisp chair statement that Carney would say, to sum it all up and tell the world what the main message and the main achievements of the Kananaskis Summit were. And when that collage of documents came up, the culmination, it really did show that Kananaskis was a summit that produced a genuinely significant performance across a broad array of the many priorities it had set and had been set for it by events from abroad, starting with Donald Trump, but then Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel too. And some of them were brand new. One with the great advances on fighting wildfires that were the burning issue of many Canadians across the land today. Those who had already been forced to evacuate their homes, those who feared they would be next. Also brand new was the looking ahead at the new AI. That was a quantum computing. Another was more familiar, but now even stronger support for Ukraine and stronger sanctions against Russia. Those alone would be enough for a significant performance, but backing them was action against foreign interference with ethnic diaspora communities. And that was of some visibility in Canada when it was learned that Mark Carney had invited Narendra Modi as a guest to the G7 summit. Several Canadians remembered that it was Modi's government who was, to some degree, complicit, acts of omission, if not commission, in the death of a Canadian of Indian origin a few years ago, because that individual had wanted to destroy India's national unity, promoting a separate Khalistan state carved out of India. But still, we did have Modi sitting down face to face with Carney to enrich, elevate to a new level the process they had put in place to deal with it. And then all G7 leaders agreeing on a new set of rules, no foreign interference by one in the other countries, and even, it seems, that the outreach guests, including Modi, would go along with that. So many accomplishments, but of course we can't really close the book until we see a year from now when France, Emmanuel Macron, the great veteran here at Kananaskis, hosts the next G7 summit. And we'll know if the priority commitments from Kananaskis had actually been implemented by the members. When Kananaskis started, we knew that the priority commitments made last year at the Apulia summit in Italy, and the host leader then, Giorgia Meloni, was here again at Kananaskis. Those commitments had been implemented at a historically high level of 92%, an A+ grade.
Coming
Now,
from
much of
professors
that
like you, that's pretty good.
Yeah, much of that took place when Joe Biden was president of the United States. But the last several months, of course, came under Donald Trump. So there's some reason to believe that the commitments at Kananaskis will be kept at a high level on average, and even by Donald Trump when he's the president of the United States for the full 12 months after.
Professor, if they've got all these long communiques, they must have been working on them for quite a while. And I understand that most of the work is done before the conference actually happens. Given that, and the work is all done by underlings, is there any real reason for the leaders themselves to get together and meet face to face?
Oh, yes, because they were drafting until the last minute and awaiting for the leaders personally to approve the final version of the 6 or so outcome documents on these specific subjects. And of course, to contribute directly to the chair's statement that Mark Carney will produce. But beyond that, and Democratic leaders have a basic responsibility to be transparent to their publics and tell the people who voted for them, who put them there, actually what they did decide. But much of the focus of the Canadian host from the beginning was on what the leaders would say to each other face to face, alone, in private. And that's why there were so many summit sessions and so many bilateral meetings too. They didn't want the leaders to spend time drafting lengthy communiques or arguing about which adjective to use in which clause, in which sentence, in very long communiques that almost no one actually reads. They wanted them to speak alone in private with their only peers and bare their souls. And
Do you think they actually bared their souls? Seriously?
Oh, yeah. Donald Trump came here in a really good mood. And when he left after day one, his press secretary said he had a great day that was vastly better. And then I think most people predicted. There was no grumpy Trumpy, right? When he flew out of Kananaskis, a vast contrast to when he flew away from the last summit Canada hosted at Charleroi in 2018. And let's face it, Trump is not a paper person. He's a people person. And if he wants to send out any messages to others, of course, he only has one instrument. That's his iPhone. It's tweets.
No, it's True Social.
Communiques.
It's True Social. We're going to take a break. We're chatting tonight with Professor John Kirton, who is head of G7 Group, talking about the G7 Summit in Kananaskis. We're going to take a break. Be back with Professor Kirton talking about what's going on in Alberta in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. So all these leaders of the free world are out in Kananaskis at the G7 summit, which I think is what, the G9, I think, actually, or maybe it's the G10. I've lost count about all the invited guests. We've got Professor Emeritus John Kirton with us tonight. He is the head of an organization called the G7 Research Group. He's also head of the G20 Research Group, the BRICS Research Group, the Global Health Diplomacy Program, and he's a professor that lots of people have had and people think very highly of. He's written a lot of textbooks that a lot of us have read, a lot of articles that a lot of us have read, and he knows a lot about what's going on at the G7. I got to ask you, sir. So social media is alive right now with a quote that Trump said that we made a mistake by uninviting Putin. You haven't mentioned that. What happened at this press conference where he said we should have kept Putin as part of the G7?
The big news from Trump's mouth at the summit was pretty much at the beginning. He said we should bring Putin back, but we should also make China's Xi Jinping a full member of the G7 too. Now on Putin, what the president said was that Russia was kicked out because of Justin Trudeau, who talked a few other leaders, including Barack Obama, to go along with it. Now, that is an alternative reality. It's simply not true. When Russia was suspended from the G8 because it invaded and annexed the Crimean region of Ukraine, this was in the spring of 2014. Justin Trudeau wasn't the Prime Minister of Canada, so he was irrelevant to the decision that was made. Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister of Canada, and Stephen Harper went along with it. Indeed, all of the G7 leaders on the same day at the same time instantly decided, as soon as they heard that Putin was going to go for it, to suspend him from the G7 summit until he returned to his previous democratic path, which meant giving Ukraine back all of its land, at least the minimum requirement. Now, the G7 is a club of major powers who are democracies. And Putin's Russian now, or the many times Putin has voiced this idea in the past few years, it's still a major power, but it's not a democracy, not even close. So it's a non-starter. But the new one, which I think got Trump even more attention because it was even more off the wall, and Donald Trump really does crave attention and needs to keep feeding more outrageous things into, social media for him, Truth Social, was Xi Jinping. Yes, he is the leader of a major power, but he's never been a Democrat, the leader of a democracy, and never even tried or wanted to become a democracy, unlike Vladimir Putin, since he became president of Russia.
Do you think that
in the year 2000?
Do you think that Vladimir Putin actually wanted to become a democracy?
He certainly did in the year 2000, and for a few years after that. But as the years went on, he certainly had changed his mind step by step. And then even a few years later, he did say the famous phrase that he said the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and he wanted to recreate it. Forgetting about Auschwitz, Nuremberg, you name it, the Armenian genocide, Pol Pot in Cambodia, the list goes on and on and on. So there's now every reason to believe, after his full-scale invasion of Ukraine, that he really wants all of Ukraine as the first step in recreating the Soviet Union as a whole. And that's why the Baltic states know it. They're NATO members now. And of course, Finland and Sweden fear it. And that's why they've joined NATO too. So there's no doubt that Putin is staying the latest anti-democratic course. And I certainly think that when Russia is readmitted to the G7, probably, almost certainly, it will have lost the war. Ukraine will again be free and whole, and Putin will no longer be the leader of the remnant Russia.
And do you think that'll happen, or is that just wishful thinking?
Oh, no, I think it's going to happen, and much sooner than many people assume.
You think there's going to be regime change in Russia? Putin is going to
Sure.
be ousted, and Russia's going to give back all of their territories that they've
Yep.
captured in Ukraine to
Yeah.
Ukraine.
Yes. The G7 leaders have said again and again, most recently, their foreign ministers at their meeting in Charlevoix, Quebec, a few months ago, that they want no less. They want a Ukraine that is once again free and whole. And in addition, that Russia will pay all the reparations to rebuild Ukraine, and that any company that has made a dime right now feeding the Russian war machine by doing business with Russia, it will not be allowed to get a single dollar from rebuilding.
But the president of the United States, Donald Trump, seems to be supporting Russia and Putin. How can that possibly happen when you don't have a full support from Donald Trump for Ukraine?
You're certainly right that Donald Trump, for the past few decades, has found it extremely difficult and rarely does say anything critical of Vladimir Putin. And we don't quite know why, but that's one of the most predictable things about Donald Trump. But he does waver now and then, and has recently saying, Putin, he gave him a chance. Putin didn't take it. He was surprised. He didn't know why. But Donald Trump, of course, is not going to be president of the United States 3.5
Can Ukraine survive 3.5
Sure.
years?
Yeah. The gross domestic product of all of Europe and Britain is vastly more than that of the Russian Federation. The military spending of the EU and the UK is more than that of the Russian Federation. So it's not a matter of relative capability. The only question is will and skill. Will the EU and the Brits, and of course backed by Canada, which can be considered a European in this regard, get their act together and agree on more support for Ukraine, stronger sanctions against Russia, and stay the course until the war is won, even if they have to do it without the United States. After all, Canada, Britain, France did it for 2 long years, from 1914 to 1917, from 1939 to 1941, against Hitler's Germany and its German predecessors. If we've done it before, we can do it again. But of course, it's so much easier and faster to do it with the United States fully on our side. And even now, Donald Trump, just a few days ago, authorized, sort of on the QT, his latest shipment of U.S. military equipment to Ukraine. So if you look at what he does, even more than what he says, I think it's a one-way street.
Sir, I interviewed David Perry, who leads a think tank on defense spending, and he said that the Canadian Army's munitions in Latvia, if attacked, would run out in 2 or 3 days.
No.
Our munitions would run out in 2
Yep.
or 3 days. How
Yep.
can what you say be true if our lack of funding is so bad that our munitions run out in 2 or 3 days?
Well, it's true right now, but also true is we've now seen Poland massively increasing its production of ammunition. Germany, too. right next door. And both of those are NATO allies. So it's NATO interoperable, right? So we don't need to build it in Brampton and ship it over. We can just borrow it within an hour or two right on the front. And one of the advances on the first day of the summit here in Kananaskis was an agreement between Canada and the EU, Canada and Germany, that they would join together for defense procurement. So each country wouldn't spend its money duplicating what the other one does. A single purchase. SAFE is what the Europeans call it. A rearm Europe, with Canada soon becoming a full part of that.
Is President Zelensky of Ukraine going to come away from Kananaskis happy or sad?
I think it's in many ways a good idea that Donald Trump chose to leave Kananaskis before President Zelensky arrived. Because if the two of them were at the same table, there was always the danger that Trump would remember all the media attention he got by humiliating Zelensky in their White House encounter, backed by his sidekick, Vice President J.D. Vance, by his side. Hey, Zelensky, why didn't you wear a suit? Hey, Zelensky, why didn't you thank the United States more? Trump likes praise. But with Trump gone, there's zero danger of that happening. So we'll just take the U.S. position as it is, as it was expressed by the foreign ministers, including Marco Rubio at the Charleroi G7 foreign ministers meeting. More recently by his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, here at Banff just a few weeks ago. And then let the Europeans, together with the Japanese, big power, the Canadians, and perhaps even the outreach partners, beginning with the Australians, the South Koreans, say, without the distraction, without the constraint from Donald Trump, let's agree on how we can do so much more, so much faster, all by ourselves. I mentioned South Korea. They've watched North Korea across the line send 10,000 North Korean soldiers to fight as part of, Putin's killing a machine. 6,000 of them are now dead, but South Korea, of course, has skin in the game, right? So the war in Ukraine is a global war already. And if Ukraine doesn't survive intact as a fully functioning democratic policy, there's every reason to believe that Putin will take the next step one by one by one, just as Hitler did back in the dismal decade of the 1930s.
And you think that the G7 leaders in Kananaskis have really agreed with a funding plan and a military plan to ensure that Ukraine regains its territory and survives as a functioning, free, democratic country with intact borders, original intact borders, and Crimea coming back to Ukraine?
Indeed, they've already said in communiques at the leaders level and before, whatever it takes, for as long as it takes. And now with Ukraine's exceptional advances in destroying Russian aircraft so far into the Russian Federation itself geographically, its success with drones in destroying Russia's energy infrastructure. There's some real hope that Ukraine by itself can do the sharp end stuff that's necessary. But we, of course, the G7 members, have to support it from behind by opening a German Rheinmetall, a plant to produce military equipment inside Ukraine itself. So all of us are moving materially into Ukraine, closer to the front, right? So that's part of the one-way street.
Well, this is a far more optimistic view than I've heard from anyone else in regards to the commitment of the rest of the world, the G7, to supporting Ukraine. So I thank you for that. We're chatting tonight with Professor John Kirton, but what's going on in Kananaskis? We're going to take a break for some messages. And when I come back, the professor has given the last summit, or at least the year of implementation of the last summit, an A+. I'm now going to ask him what he thinks, what his grade would be for the new chair, Mark Carney. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes, and we're going to ask the professor for a grade for our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. Stay with us.
Bibi threatened to kill the Ayatollah today.
Are you done now?
Bibi.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. My guest is Professor John Kirton. He's head of an organization called the G7 Group, the G20 Group. He's a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto. Professor, you gave the last summit an A+ in regards to its implementation over the course of the last year. I think a lot of people were wondering, brand new prime minister, you've only been in the job a month, maybe 2 months, if you count when he was unelected prime minister, but a month since he was elected prime minister. And he all of a sudden has to chair a G7 summit. How do you do? How do you rank him?
Well, so far he's doing a great job in the design of the summit, and we can detail that. And then, of course, another opening, another show, but the first for him on the first day of the G7 summit, the Donald Trump day, I think we'll call it. And that's clearly in the grand finale, the outreach day, day 2. On the first day, it was remarkable. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, when Donald Trump arrived on Air Force One at the Calgary airport, he walked down the stairs wearing his All-American MAGA hat, America First. But as soon as he got to Kananaskis and walked to his first meeting with Mark Carney, no hat, but there was a lapel pin, the first time he had ever worn it, with 2 intertwined flags, a Canadian one as well as an American one. So the message was clear: better together, and cooperation between the 2 countries with their 2 separate flags. So it was night and day. And during the first day, he made 0 reference to not only Governor Carney, I expected he wouldn't, but also not a single reference to 51st state, right? So that's completely gone. And Trump is physically gone too. And as soon as he gets in Air Force One, we're not going to see a repeat of Charlevoix, where he sees Carney on TV taking all the praise. Trump's going to be fully focused on what's happening day by day, minute by minute in Tehran, in Israel, evacuation order for all of Tehran. So this war is getting worse.
So our prime minister has said that sort of the trade relations around the world, the security apparatus around the world has changed given Donald Trump's presidency. Does this G7 summit change it? Are we back to where we were before Donald Trump started trade wars and tariff wars and started threats against Greenland and Panama and Canada? Or are we still in this situation where we've got to worry about trade and security?
Well, on the trade front, Trump's tariff war, let's call it what it is. We're not back to where we were before Trump became president of the United States, but we've taken substantial steps backwards, which of course are substantial steps forward towards free, open, fair trade. A deal with Carney that they'll come to an agreement within 30 days. An actual reduction in Trump's tariffs on the United Kingdom, codified in a joint statement the two leaders waved in front of the cameras on day one. And on the broader issue, well, the lapel pin told the story of the Canadian front. But Emmanuel Macron, the great veteran from France, the other big president here, came to Kananaskis, not Paris, Calgary direct, but through Greenland, showing that he would protect Greenland, a fellow member of the European Union, through Denmark, which still has sovereignty. And since Trump had said he would not rule out seizing Greenland by military force, and because, well, Macron has a nuclear weapon deterrent of his own, that was a very powerful signal. So I think another reason Trump knew Macron's flight path, if you will, dropping down in Greenland with a vastly better reception from the locals than J.D. Vance and his wife did.
You're not suggesting that France would use a nuclear weapon against the United States to protect Greenland, are you?
Yeah, if necessary, there will be retaliatory tariffs. Ursula von der Leyen, when she gave her opening news conference on day zero, the evening before the leaders met on the first day, said directly that she was optimistic that she'd get an even better deal than she had from Trump a few Sunday evenings ago. But she did say, if not, the European Union was already finalizing the retribution tariffs. She used a nicer word than that. And because the European Union is a bigger economic space than Trump's United States, they're going to hurt Americans as well as Europeans.
So Professor, there's two schools of thought, maybe a lot more, but let me simplify it to two schools of thought. One school is that this is just the art of the deal, that Donald Trump starts with an outrageous position, 100% tariffs or 150% tariffs, but it's just to negotiate. And he comes back from that in the end. And that outrageous position he has taken, anchoring theory or whatever you want to call it, is helpful to his negotiating stance. And a lot of Republicans have said it's the art of the deal. Another point of view, and David Frum has been the individual that's probably spoken about this the most, is that no, Trump is real about this, that since 1987, he's been talking about how tariffs are a beautiful word, and tariffs financed the U.S. government during the 1880s, 1890s, et cetera, and that he took out full-page ads in the New York Times in 1987 to trumpet the benefit of tariffs. Where do you think we are? Is this art of the deal, or is this, no, he really wants to increase tariffs and
both.
The U.S. deficit?
On tariffs, it's not the art of the deal. On annexing Canada, it could well be. Greenland might be in the middle. Trump, and he said it again today on the first day of the Kananaskis summit, I'm a tariff man. I believe in tariffs. It's part of his self-identity. So he wants tariffs like President McKinley did a long time ago. He probably wants his gravestone to say, tariff man, rather than Golden Dome or a greatest golfer in the world. And then, of course, he deeply believes that tariffs, as they were back in the 19th century, could be the largest source of revenue for the US government, so he could lower taxes on everybody, starting with the rich, but going all the way and take them off completely. It's only very recently when the numbers have come in since he started his tariff war, well, January 20th inauguration day, that he's being told by his own people they have produced vastly less revenue for the US government than our earlier predictions were. And that, I think, is one of the reasons that he'll make it easier to back off. Although even at the end of any deal he does, he still seems to be that he'll demand a 10% base tariff across the board. And it's all the other bigger stuff on top of that that could go completely back off. On I want Canada, I want Greenland. On Canada, he doesn't seriously believe that Canadians will just give it to him because he uses what he said he would, economic force, which is the tariff war, but a lot of other economic measures which could be unleashed. So I think in that case, he just wants to soften up Canada. Oh, don't take my country, and here I'll give you my economy, basically, instead. But with Greenland, he does, I think, know, despite what he says, he needs critical minerals. He knows that, unlike his delusions about steel and aluminum, the United States cannot simply find, process, produce all the critical minerals it needs in the USA. They're just not born in the USA in any way. And that's why he wants some Greenland. And oh, by the way, it's a factor in his thinking for Canada too. So I think at Kananaskis, one of the bigger advances against that backdrop is the agreement on a G7 wide, even G7 plus arrangement to strengthen critical minerals supply chain. So, for example, we are not going to have the United States get all the uranium it needs for its nuclear warheads, for civilian nuclear reactors, for clean energy, to feed the voracious demands of, AI data centers. They can simply import it a train ride away, right next door from Saskatchewan. Cameco, Canada is one of the top 3 Ukrainian producers in the world. And they thus, the United States, all the G7 no longer need an isotope of uranium from Russia. So the sanctions, the energy sanctions against Russia can go down to 0 on the Ukrainian front. And because that can be done within days, physically, to get the stuff into the USA, uranium, then it's much faster than it would take to go through the painful process of Trump trying to spend a lot of money or coercive measures to get US companies to start to get their Geiger counters out and find out where in the USA there may be uranium, and then to dig it out, to process it with permits. that'll take years. It's far too late, and he'll be long gone. So critical minerals supply chains, I think, solves a number of problems, and above all, problems for Americans in the USA itself.
I understand that you're a political scientist, not a historian, but you probably know this better than I. If Donald Trump calls himself tariff man, and you've described him as tariff man, why? My understanding is that after McKinley, as a congressman, instituted tariffs, there was an economic recession, if not depression, in the United States in 1893, 1897. Certainly lots of us have seen, maybe best in that movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the speech about the Smoot-Hawley tariffs and how wonderfully successful they were. Not. Have tariffs ever worked? Have they ever been really successful? Where does this tariff man strategy come from?
Well, McKinley is the great icon, as you said. Donald Trump would be well advised to look what happened to McKinley's party in the midterm elections after he instituted his tariffs. They lost big, and Donald Trump certainly doesn't want to do that in the midterms coming up fast. The one historical example where we could argue that tariffs worked is John A. Macdonald's national policy. The Americans put great tariffs on us, no free trade. We tried to get a free trade deal back in the 19th century. The Americans wouldn't give in to us. But then Macdonald reluctantly concluded we had to build a tariff wall of our own in order to, yes, get revenue for the government, to build a Canadian industry, even if it was a higher cost. Also to diversify our trade to the United Kingdom. And to make it work, you needed what we would now call critical infrastructure. And that was the railroad. Some of your listeners may remember Gordon Lightfoot's song, "There Was a Time in This Fair Land When the Railroad Didn't Run," when the great majestic mountains right out my window stood alone beneath the sun.
The Canadian Railway Trilogy.
The white man, and long before the wheel. Indigenous peoples are important here at Kananaskis. But then the CPR joined us together and kept the Americans out. And we only were forced to move back to real free trade with the United States, tentatively during the First World War, but especially during the Second, the Defense Production Sharing Agreements, starting in 1941.
We're going to take a final break, and come back with some concluding comments with our guest, Professor John Kirton, talking about the G7 summit in Kananaskis in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We got Professor John Kirton of the G7 group, Professor Emeritus at U of T, talking about the Kananaskis G7 summit. Professor, I got to ask you two last questions if I could. Our Prime Minister, I guess it was last week, said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Is Canada at the table today?
No, it was in the head chair running the conversation around the table, even deciding what food and drink would be actually put on the table for the leaders' snacks, first meal of the day, the lunch. So it was completely the opposite. Trump didn't really get Carney to give up anything that we know so far. And we can see how Trump, certainly in the symbolism, changed a lot. Now, until we see the outcome documents and have a day or two to scrutinize every word the day after. We won't know for sure what the real deal of the bargains were, but I think Canada and Carney will emerge significantly stronger after the Kananaskis summit than they were when they went into it, amidst all the uncertainty about what Donald Trump would do, even if he would even show up. And then, of course, the blindsided from out of the blue attack, the new war in the Middle East, Israel's attack on Iran, which took Trump back home halfway through the 2-day summit itself.
So the other question I'd like to ask you, which I won't, because you're probably not supposed to be partisan, but I'd love to ask you how you think Pierre Poilievre would have done at the head of the table and whether we would have had a similar result. But I won't ask you that question about Pierre Poilievre. In 1988, John Turner said to Brian Mulroney, if you give up our economic sovereignty, eventually our political sovereignty will be at risk. Given what you've said about Donald Trump's threats, was John Turner right when he said that to Brian Mulroney?
No. And there was a third leg in that great debate at that time. It was cultural sovereignty, right? And our fellow Canadians who speak French all the time in Quebec can speak most eloquently about that. It's the primacy of the political. So if you keep your political sovereignty, your political autonomy, automanos, give yourself the own law. And that's what every Canadian government, whether it be led by Carney, Poilievre, Justin Trudeau, always has and would. Then you can use that to create your economic sovereignty. And Canada has so much of the key factors of production. Remember Economics 100. We've got the land. Those are the resources. We've got the capital. I mean, we invented artificial intelligence at the University of Toronto a short while ago. And now we've got the labor, 40 million strong and more immigrants coming in. And we are the one biggest voice that immigrants are good for you. So we're on a winning streak, a hat trick coming together for, I think, a fine Canadian future.
You heard it here, everyone. We're on a winning streak, a hat trick. Professor Kirton, thank you so much for joining us and telling us about the Kananaskis conference. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Alberta, at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos go up on my website, briancrombie.com, and on social media as soon as the radio show goes to air. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night, everybody.